up, you guys? My name is Grace Lauren Taylor, and you are listening to episode 44 of the Trauma Dump Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Here at the Trauma Dump Podcast, we seek to answer the question, what is mental health? How do I take care of my own, and how do I support others? This week, we will be discussing the topic of how men's mental health affects women's mental health with our very special guest of the week, life coach Elise Micheals. Be sure to go follow Elise over on Instagram. Her Instagram is at Elise Micheals _, which is at ELISEMICHEALS _. Remember, if you'd like to share on the show, please message us in our Discord in the podcast participants channel along with your unique experiences, and we will match you to the right episode. And just a quick disclaimer before we start, I am not a licensed health professional. This podcast only seeks to create community and further understanding of these topics that are so often overlooked and extremely misunderstood. If you or a loved one are in need of medical professional help, we have resources in our description. The topics discussed here are for a mature audience, so viewer discretion is always advised. We're going to be talking to Elise about her experiences as a mental health coach and why she specifically chose to become a men's mental health coach, why men's mental health matters so much to her, and how men's mental health affects women. She has told me that men are taught not to feel emotions, to only rely on themselves, and therefore isolate themselves from any kind of help. This can destroy relationships, partnerships, business opportunities, and friendships, and the list goes on and on. According to research, socially constructed differences in roles and responsibilities, status, and power between men and women contribute to differences in mental health. It also contributes to health-seeking behavior of those affected and the responses of the health sector and society as a whole. Mental health differences between men and women have been attributed to sex and gender differences. Rooted in genetics, anatomy, and physiology, sex represents a biological construct. In contrast, gender compromises psychological variables that differentiate women and men. Now, we're just going to be talking about the two opposite genders. I personally believe that there are more than two genders, and just to keep this as simplified as possible so it's easily digestible, we're just going to be talking about men and women. For those of you guys that are transgender or non-binary, please comment down below what type of mental health struggles that you currently face and how those struggles are impacted by other genders. I would really love to know, and I'd really love to hear your experiences. And if you're liking what we're doing here over on the Trauma Dump Podcast, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button down there, hit that button, and hit the post notification bell so you get a notification every time we post. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate the show. It really helps us out a lot. It helps the show reach way more people than it would normally, and it helps more people become trauma informed. Hi, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing, Elise?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this topic. Oh, so exciting. So share with us who you are. Where can we find you on social media?
Well, I'm Elise Micheals, men's mental health coach. You can find me anywhere on social media at Elise Micheals. And yeah, I help men find purpose and passion again by healing subconscious trauma.
Oh, that's so exciting. Oh my goodness, that is so exciting. So we're going to be talking about how men's mental health affects women and how we can differentiate ourselves from that as a whole, but also embrace one another and help each other to succeed when it comes to mental health. So before we start the interview, you go by she, her pronouns, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I always just have to make sure because you never know.
I never had anybody ask me that before.
Well, now you have. Now you can say that you have. Are you comfortable with sharing your personal experiences?
Yeah, if I'm not, I'll let you know. Do you go by she, her pronouns?
I don't actually.
Okay. What pronouns do you use?
They, them.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And to make sure that I'm not crossing any of your boundaries and respecting your experiences, please feel free to interrupt me at any time if you feel uncomfortable. We can also take a break at any time. And if you don't feel like answering a question, please let me know. I'll just skip it. I promise I won't get offended because my priority is to make sure that you feel safe and comfortable at all times. So, let me first ask you, why men's mental health? Why did you want to start life coaching for men specifically?
Well, I actually wanted to coach for women. But when I was posting the video content, only men reached out to me for help. So I just realized that they didn't have a lot of support when it came to mental health. So I just decided that I was going to shift directions, study what their struggles were. And yeah, that was 4 years ago. So it's been a journey.
Wow, I've never heard that before. That's super interesting that only men reached out to you. How did that feel for you when only men reached out?
I mean, it felt weird because I didn't know, because what I really discovered is like I wasn't thinking about men. And that's when I realized that nobody is ever really thinking about men. And so when I was approached, I was like, how am I going to help them when they're like twice my age and they make XYZ amount of money? You know, you see someone who's so much more successful than you, how could they want something like, how could they possibly think I have a skill set that they don't? So there was a lot of imposter syndrome, but I just said to myself, Elise, if you said that you could help people with pain, just try it and see what happens. And so I got on a call with a couple of men and the results were there. And that's when I realized, okay, like this is a thing. This is a thing we can do.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And oh, I feel you on the imposter syndrome. I've had it for so long since I started the podcast. And it wasn't until one of my guests who's a licensed psychotherapist was like, "Well, your experiences are just as valid as say my experiences because you're doing a lot of research on all of these topics. And just because you don't have a degree in it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to give your opinions and your experiences because she's like I think it would help a lot of people who maybe don't feel comfortable reaching out to a therapist or don't feel comfortable reaching out to someone that might have a lot of information and it really helped me out a lot of being like, okay, so my experience is valid. My ability to share what I'm going through is valid. And I mean, it's so exciting. It's so exciting to talk to all of my guests and all the people that come on and share their experiences because I really think we have so much more in common than we even realize, especially when it comes to men's mental health versus women's mental health. Everyone struggles with mental health. Everyone struggles with health. And so I think it's really interesting that men felt comfortable enough to talk to you. That must also feel like really empowering that these people who, we perceive as maybe in a better position than us come to us for help.
Yeah, I mean, at first it was very validating. I think I had the same experience that you did with the psychotherapist because the psychotherapist became my client like way in the beginning, and he was a psychotherapist for 30 years. So to have like a doctor become your client when you're just starting and they've had all this experience and then have them tell you what a difference you've made in their life. Yes, that was very validating. Now that I've done it for 4 years, I try not to let my opinion on myself or my skill set hinder on the public reaction because as my audience has grown, if you do that, your life just becomes a roller coaster. So I really try to just focus on the work and take things in stride. Um, but yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it's definitely very validating.
Hmm, interesting. Well, I'm really glad that I have you on and that we're gonna talk about this because research suggests that we actually have a better understanding of men's health than women's health in general. Why do you think that is?
Assume that could be true for like men's health, like fitness, just lifestyle in general, because men are taken, or they have been taken more seriously in life in general. Um, Women have been taken more seriously by each other when it comes to their issues and their mental health issues. But as far as physical, they always kind of put it on the back burner. Like that was always a man's thing. Men are focused on being strong, they're focused on protection. So, like, a lot of men's careers are focused on physical stability. So, there's just always been more research, I think, done and focused towards them because they're in the military, they're firemen, they're policemen. Obviously, women do these jobs too, but mostly men are on the front lines of these careers, right? So, like, there's just so much more energy and focus that's been dumped and poured into researching men's physical health and well-being.
Hmm, that is that is very interesting to point out that, you know, on average, there's a lot more men in trades and in physical labor intensive fields than there are women. You know, my fiance, he's a tradesman, he's a plumber. And when he was getting his license, the woman that taught him, she's has a master's in plumbing, and she was doing these online courses for them and meeting them in person, helping them out with whatever they needed. And I was like, "Joey, your teacher's a woman." I was, like, so shocked and so excited, and he's like, "Yeah, she's a badass too. Her husband is also a plumber, but he does not have his master's. He's just a journeyman." And then she has 2 boys that are both plumbers as well. She just creates badasses, like, she's so awesome. And he's like, "I really appreciate learning from her versus a lot of the guys that am working with, that I'm studying under, because she seems to care and is very focused on how I am doing, not just physically with the tasks, but also mentally, because she talks about how these labor intensive works can be really mentally taxing, and they if you're doing bad on a job, you can feel like you as a person are bad in general. And she really helps me out a lot to differentiate myself from my work, and I really appreciate her. And he's like, none of the guys that I've ever worked with, will open up to me on that level, and that's why, like, she's the best. Like, that's really interesting. And I was talking to him about that. I was like, why do you think guys don't open up to you about when they're struggling? He's like, well, sometimes they do. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, let's go grab a beer. But we don't really ever talk about it. We just say, oh, life is shitty. And we just agree that life is shitty. We don't ever like delve into why life is shitty or how we're struggling. And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "I don't know. I guess men don't do that." I'm like, "Why do you, Elise, why do you think that men don't on average talk about these things when they're struggling?"
Because it's not socially ingrained into their culture, right? From the second a boy is born, he's treated differently than a woman, less nurtured, more, big boys don't cry. If he falls on the playground, it's kind of like, get up, you're totally fine. Like, focused on being a man, not being a pussy. And they grow up and they don't know how to communicate with each other because they don't know how to communicate with themselves. Right. If I can't express myself, how am I going to ask someone else to hold space for me? How am I going to express it to someone else? So a lot of men will gravitate towards women because they know that women are emotionally open and available to receive, but a lot of men are not. A lot of men are closed off, and men fear judgment from other men because that's who they're hazed by usually. Um, Growing up is like, so it's
Yeah,
tough out there for that.
it is. I mean, according to my research, like adolescent girls have a substantially higher prevalence for depression and eating disorders during adolescence as well as suicidal ideas and attempts than boys. But out of adolescence, boys are more likely to struggle with anger issues than girls, engage in high risk behaviors, and commit suicide, not just attempt, but they're more likely to actually succeed in a suicidal attempt. They're more likely to commit. And teenage girls are more likely to have inward directed symptoms, whereas juvenile boys are more likely to act out. And I it brings me all back to like my Mimi, my grandmother. My family's from Jamaica, and she immigrated here with her four boys. She never had any girls, and she would tell us all the time about how all of them just got into trouble all the time, and she would try to talk to them about, "Hey, why are you doing this?" And they would never talk about it until she actually sat them down with her husband, my papa, and was like, "Okay, we need to have a family discussion. We just moved here. Why are you acting the way that you're acting?" And she really started to ingrain in my uncles and my father about how to communicate what you're going through, because if you don't, she can't help you. Like, papa can't help you, Mimi can't help you, mom can't help you, dad can't help you. And so I was raised by very well-spoken men, and I didn't know that men had issues opening up until I got into middle school.
Mm.
I didn't understand, because people in my family, which my own family dynamic, are great communicators, very strong communicators. Each and every one of us talks about how we're feeling or if something hurt us. And when I got to middle school, I started to get bullied by a group of girls, and some boys watched. And I went up to them and I was like, "Well, why didn't you stop them?" And they're like, "Well, you're a girl and we're not supposed to get in between that. Like, boys don't fight girls." And I was like, "I have two brothers that beat me up all the time. Boys don't fight girls?" I was like, I was so confused and so frustrated, and I didn't know what to do about it, because I was allowed at home to feel all of the emotions, and I started to recognize that that wasn't the case for a lot of the kids around me, and I started to get ostracized because I was told that my emotions were too big, or I expressed myself too much, or I was being too dramatic. I was like, "Well, you guys feel these emotions too. What's going on?" And I think that's an American thing. I think it's a very much an American thing to not express all of the emotions to everyone, but have your isolated groups that you chitter chatter with. And so I didn't understand that growing up. Do you resonate with that, of like, when you're going through something, you're not gonna say it to the world, but you'll tell, like, your specific individual groups of people?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a time and a place for everything. I think we have to learn healthy
Mm,
boundaries because not
mm,
everybody deserves to hear our story. That's something that I had to learn, right? Because if you're someone who's used to keeping everything inside, all of a sudden you kind of want you say I'm an open book, but then you kind of trauma dump on people, right? You start telling
mhm,
everything about yourself because it's a defense mechanism to say here are all the worst things about me that you can see up front, so if you want to leave you can leave right now. But it pushes people away because it's not inviting, right? It's a
mm,
defense. And so I think it's good to learn emotional stability, to know who is right to talk to, who is not. And I definitely don't just think it's American, because there are a lot of cultures that are very just, a lot of European countries that are basically founded off of emotionlessness. And anybody who's listening to this from Europe will totally agree with me that there's certain cultures, I won't name them, but they know who they are. Um, and then there are certain cultures that are very passionate and almost toxic and abusive when they express their emotions, right? And that's also a stereotype that's well known. So there's different stereotypes within cultures that are extremes. But definitely not America is just the only one that struggles. It's like every culture and every country has its thing, right?
Mm-hmm. I do agree with that. I do agree with that. It is very interesting to point out that there are, cultural norms, and even within those cultural norms, there are mental health issues that are just, stigmatized in their own ways. And bringing it back to women and men, women, in my own like opinion, are more communal than men. And I've witnessed it a lot of whenever you see a group of women, they're so much more, they have so much more of a capacity to embrace one another and support each other when they're going through things. Whereas a community of guys isn't. And when I went to college, people started rushing fraternities, sororities, stuff like that. And one of my brothers, he was rushing for a fraternity. And this guy that he hung out with all the time, every single day, he never knew that he struggled so much with mental health. He thought this was the happiest dude that he'd ever met. He loved to be around him. And my brother and I, our father had just died. And so my brother tried to open up to this guy, and this guy was like, "Oh, no, no, please don't bring that here. Like, I don't need to hear it. Like, you can talk to your girlfriend about that." This guy told my brother that. And so my brother was like, "Oh, okay, well, all right." And then literally a month later, the same guy committed suicide. And my brother was so taken aback because he's like, "Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he talk to me about this?" When I tried to talk to him about what I was going through, he didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to talk about it. And he was so confused. And I want to hear your opinion on that. Why do you think that happened?
Well, I wouldn't have an opinion on why that happened for that specific
Mhm.
situation. Obviously, I'm very sorry to your brother in that experience. Some of us are just in such a dark hole at a certain point that we get to that we feel like it's not even worth it. Right? If you're someone who's really struggled with depression and suicidal ideation, it's not even that you're sad. It's just like, this seems like the most logical thing to do. And there's no point in talking about it because there's no way out. There's nothing left. Nobody cares. And the world is better off if I don't talk about it, actually. And if I'm just not even here, I can just disappear and the world is better off without me. So I think that when you become so used to ignoring your own emotions and you're in such a dark place, you don't have a capacity to receive anybody else's pain. And so he rejected your brother's pain, but at the same time, it's because he was so full of his own, right? And maybe nobody ever really asked him what he was full of. So he just didn't have any more space,
Mm.
right? And so it's really sad, and everybody's different. But I think that's why it's always good to be proactive and just check in on people. And when you check in on people, not doing it in a way that forces them to have some bad issues, but that just leaves space. And like you said, when you open up first and you're vulnerable first, it is an invitation for them to open up as well. I think it's really good for men when they do open up to others, because it totally opens a new door that the other person now feels comfortable, like, well, he did it, so now I can do it.
Yeah, I really agree with that as well. And it is very distressing when you perceive someone to be all happy go lucky, and then you find out that that's not the case. It can be extremely distressing. And I like how you said this, like, whenever you're so full of your own distress, it's very hard to hold space for another person's distress. I completely agree with that. Completely 100% agree with that. What would be your recommendation to someone listening right now who is, you know, overwhelmed with hardship? What would be your recommendation on how they can open up to those around them in a mutually beneficial way?
Well, I think a lot of people also don't open up because they don't want to be a burden. So I think if you want to eliminate that feeling of guilt, go to someone who you know it's not going to be a burden, like a counselor or a therapist, or someone who has the tools to help you, because friends and family, as much as we love them, they are usually not skilled unless they are a trained therapist or whatever to hold space. They don't know how, and they come with their own set of biases, and they'll probably respond in a not good way. But no matter what, if you are someone who's struggling and you're just like so overwhelmed, it becomes like a pressure cooker, and all you need to do is release a little bit of the steam. Once you start talking about it to someone or mentioning it somewhere, even if you have to do it anonymously on a Reddit post, anonymously on a Quora post or something, like you're responding to a thread, that's going to start letting out the steam. So you start to feel like, okay, it's not as bad as, because the isolation makes it worse. The darkness makes it worse. The holding it inside just makes it worse. It's not actually as bad as you feel like it is when you start releasing it. And I promise you. So start off releasing it somewhere and then figure out the next best move from there.
And a quick resource for those of you guys listening, we have an anonymous free Discord for anybody to share whatever they're going through. We have so many different channels of discussion and so many different channels that include more than trauma. If you guys need resources, we also have a lot of resources that I provide for different areas of mental health and also crisis lifeline. The suicide crisis lifeline is 988, or you can text 741-741 to text with a crisis counselor. And they're available anytime, day or night, 24/7. And it's always free and confidential if you guys want to ever reach out to that resource. But according to my research, women have a significantly higher frequency of depression and anxiety in adulthood, while men have a larger prevalence of substance use disorders and antisocial behaviors. And women have a higher prevalence of depression and anxiety disorders due to genetic and biological factors. But my research also showed that even when men and women will have different periods of depression, women are more likely to go seek help for said depression, and men are more likely to just suffer in silence until it is too late. And your entire platform is giving tools for men whenever they need assistance. And I really want to commend you on that. I mean, that is super beneficial. It is super helpful. It is super amazing. Like, I was scrolling through your website for a while. I was like, wow. And then your Instagram, your content is very straightforward, but also super compassionate, but not in a way that babies people, because I also feel like men will, because they're not used to being, taken care of emotionally. If they see someone, baby them, essentially, it's a turn off. It really is, of being like, oh, I'm not a baby, I'm a man. I don't need to be spoken down to. And I think your content is really amazing, that you're not speaking down to anyone. You're just saying, this is what it is. And I'm here if you want to reach out, if you need help, I'm here. And I just want to commend you for that, because I see it. I see it's having a significant impact on so many people. And you're amazing, Elise. Really and truly you are.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. And yeah, that means a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And have you ever wanted to open your practice up more to women, or are you solely focused on men?
Right now, I'm solely focused on men. I've thought about opening it up to women, but I've just focused so much on men's issues, and there's still so much more to do that I think it would be unwise of me to. I mean, women have so much support. They have so much support. So the only way that I would open it up to women is just to help men more. So like creating more masterclasses on how women can be a safe space for men, on how women can understand men a little bit better. That's probably more the resource route that I would go for that.
Interesting. So emotional expression, healthcare, and asking for help are all framed as feminine traits, when in today's society, they're very framed as feminine traits, but 50 years ago, they weren't. 60 years ago, they weren't. Why do you think that shift happened?
Well, I mean, there's so many things, right? Like we can never pinpoint just one thing, but obviously like the feminist movement giving women the ability to get their own careers and women having desires to branch out of the stereotypical feminine things, it adds some balance to the mix. So it's not just so crowded in one area. We talked about the different careers and like women can be plumbers now and they can be firemen and in the military. And before they just totally couldn't, they only had certain things that they could do. So and they were only allowed to get jobs XYZ amount. So men used to be the only doctors. They used to be the only healthcare providers, and they used to be the only ones taking care of for their health, right? So as everything balances, we also see shifts and we see extremes in the pendulum swings as well. Because when people are hungry, when they're starving, they eat more than their usual fill, right? So it happens like that in societal norms too when things change.
Hmm. So do you think that also could be, not like a causation, but maybe a correlation for a lot more men struggling with asking for help?
Not necessarily, because I think that's always been, because no one has ever really acknowledged men when it comes to the mental health part. I mean, mental health was never something really taken seriously until like 20 years ago. And then it was just women talking to each other. And like you said, that has always been a thing since the beginning of time. If men went out and did the hunting, they express themselves through action, and women express themselves through dialect, right? Through emoting. And they need to be more attuned to emotions because they're the ones who have to take care of the baby. So they understand what the baby needs from the type of cry the baby has, right? A man may not understand that. So I think now that we don't have to do things that are so primal, now we can actually expand like, oh, men actually do have emotions. It's not just women that have emotions, and we're opening up more to it. But it's like evolution, right? It's hard to just change something in an instant and be like, oh, you're not a pussy because you emote things. It's like they still have to get warmed up to it and they still have to be able to understand. And I think things have changed. I mean, I started this career 4 years ago, and now men's mental health is kind of like a fad. Like there are so many men's coaches, but when I started, there really weren't that many.
Mm. Do you feel like the market being a little bit flooded, oversaturated, do you think there's any misinformation being spread?
I mean, always. There's always misinformation being spread, but a lot of the information that's out there is just like, we live in the social media era where people are trying to get likes and whatever. So people say the most crazy stuff. I mean, sometimes even I think about it too, right? Like, should I say what off the wall thing should I say to try to get more views or whatever? Like you think about it because money follows attention and people follow attention. So if you don't get people's eyeballs on you, how can you help them?
Mm.
Right. So, I mean, there's just a lot of people, though, saying ridiculous things just to get views, and nothing's based on actually helping people or based on facts.
Yeah. Yeah. I resonate with that really too, because for the podcast, Spotify and Apple Podcasts, I'm doing pretty well. I'm getting like really good feedback and lots of listeners. But when it comes to YouTube, I have found that only a couple videos will spike. And it's really when I'm talking about very drastic things versus, say, like one of my videos is like suicidal prevention. That video has like 3,000 views and has a lot of people interacting, versus I had another episode with a man talking about men's mental health, and that only has 60 views. And I was really confused. I was like, why? Why not? Why are more people not wanting to engage with something like this? And I also think it probably is because a lot of men don't want to admit when they're struggling, because emotional expression of that, like men are expected to be emotionally stable and have strong and independent, self-reliant demeanors. And as a result, men are encouraged to define themselves in opposition to women by concealing their own health needs and refusing to seek care because they're prescribing to a socially prescribed male role that is actually hurting them. And I was talking to one of my guests, and he was expressing how when he was struggling, he recognized he was struggling, but was like so afraid of his friends judging him for struggling because he's like, men will pick on each other. We'll point out each other's flaws, and it's seen as like, oh, funny, haha, but it can, for someone who's actually struggling with those things, it can be life or death situation, and it can lead to a lot worse outcomes than men realize. And he's like, I wish there was a way for men to be able to say, stop doing that without looking like they're weak or looking like they are, you know, a wimp. And he was talking about that. I want to pose that question to you. How can men create those boundaries of when something is going too far to like preserve themselves without looking like they were weak?
I think that's the wrong question to ask,
Mm,
because if you are in a position where you need to protect yourself, it shouldn't matter how the other party perceives you. Because if
mm-hmm.
that party is not willing to back down when you set a boundary, they're not someone you want to be associated with. So who cares if you look weak in their eyes or not? You need to be willing to sacrifice looking strong in someone else's eyes so that you can be strong for yourself, because you're more important than their opinion of you.
That's so
So
real.
we ask ourselves the wrong question. What do I have to do to get them to love me? What do I have to do to not look weak? Like, you have to be willing to let that person go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
so
it sounds like
real.
they're not even helping you anyway, right? If they're constantly ragging on you, and that's probably a person who struggles a lot, and that's the only way they learned how to connect, which usually means they came from a background where they were punished a lot or nothing ever felt good enough. So the only way they know how to feel good is by demeaning others, or that like yelling at each other was the only way they connected. And so that has nothing to do with health or improving your ability to succeed in life. So we need to be able to see that and say, dude, this is not working for me. And like, you don't even have to say anything, just phase out, find someone else who's supportive.
That's so real. Find someone else. My dad would tell me that all the time. I would come to him as a little kid and be like, this person doesn't want to be my friend. He's like, okay. He's like, okay, you can find a new friend. And I would get so sad. He's like, that's their loss. It's not your loss. Because if you're constantly seeking validation from someone who doesn't give a rat's ass about you, you're hurting yourself. That's self-harm. And he would tell me all the time, he's like, if you want friends, look for friends. Keep widening that net. Keep searching because you're going to find your people eventually. And the people that love you and will care about you will stick around. The people that don't love you, that are using you, won't. And just let them leave because it's not beneficial to try to make them stay. You're hurting yourself, and you might also be preventing their growth. And that as a little kid, it didn't sink in with me until he passed away, and I started seeing a lot of people that used me start to leave me because I was no longer the, happy-go-lucky type person, super giving, like, I would pay for all of my friends to get stuff done with me, and I just stopped doing that, right? Because I was grieving, and I noticed, like, all the people leave, and I heard my dad's voice in my head of, "Let them. Just let them go, because those are not the people that are going to want to see you succeed, and those are not the people that are gonna keep building you up." And I'm so grateful that I had a very strong, emotionally mature, and emotionally available father, because a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't have that type of dad there for them. And his loss is even greater because of that, because he was emotionally there for me. He always held space for his children to cry. He took more the mother role than our mother ever did, because my mom did not have the capacity to. Oh my God, it was not great. But I reflect on that now, as you know, I have a fiance and we're going to be getting married and we are starting our own family. And I see the traits of my father's emotional availability in my fiance. And I was talking to my brothers about this, and my brothers are like, "Oh, I'm so glad that you found a really good dude, because some of the dudes you dated sucked." They weren't there for you, and they weren't there for us either. And it was really interesting to recognize that of a lot of young men don't know how to be there for each other and don't know how to emotionally support, say, their partners, because they were never shown that example of how to be emotionally supportive. What advice would you give to, say, a young man listening right now, of he's wondering how can he be more emotionally available to others?
It always starts with self. So learn how to support yourself and get a third party to help you. Get a coach, get a therapist to help you walk through what happens when you're triggered, how to handle conflict, how to hold space for someone else, how to know when someone is holding space for you. And men have intuition as well. So once you start getting in touch with those things, your intuition really kicks into gear. So you'll start being more attracted to healthier people and stop being as attracted to unhealthy people. Because when we're unhealthy, we attract unhealthy people. And that's a fact a lot of us don't want to face. A lot of us go into the blame game of, oh, they were so awful. They were a narcissist, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but you were a perfect receptacle for the narcissist. So you have to like really look at that, because 2 + 2 doesn't equal 1. All right. So you got to look into that.
That is very true. To examine yourself, but also examine the people that you surround yourself with, because you know that saying, you are who you hang out with. It's so true. It really is. And it is very difficult. I was talking to one of my best girlfriends, and she was saying, "I think I'm outgrowing a lot of my friends." I was like, "Well, why do you think that is?" She's like, "Well, I want to improve, and they're still stuck in their teenage years of blaming everybody and not like accepting responsibility." I was like, "Yeah, I see that." She's like, "They make really unfortunate financial decisions, and then they'll complain to me about those unfortunate financial decisions when I had told them previously, before they made those decisions, to not do it." And it's so draining to be around those types of people that don't accept any influence or any positive influence. I was like, "That's a really good point. That is a really good point." And it's super, super interesting of, when you see true masculinity of, there's positivity in being a provider. There is positivity in being a protector, but also that needs to be going both ways. You can't just protect everyone. You also have to protect yourself. You can't just provide for everyone. You also have to provide for yourself. And it's I love this discussion, because it's opening up so many different things in my own mind of how I perceive myself and my role within my relationship. Because I would say that I have a very traditional relationship. I work from home, but I am stay at home, like take on that wife role. I do all of the cooking and cleaning and all of, you know, that jazz. And my fiance does all of the providing, all of the financial stuff. I don't have to worry about any of that ever. And it's really relieving. And I've had discussions with some of my friends of being like, well, don't you want to be a boss babe and like feel that ability to provide for yourself and you don't need a man? I'm like, well, I
No.
like having no, I like having my guy provide for me. I appreciate him. And he finds so much fulfillment in his ability to provide. I don't want to change anything about that. It's a dynamic that works for us. And I think it's really interesting with the feminist movement. Of course, it brought a lot of really positive change and a lot of equality, but there's a very bitter woman movement happening and a very bitter man movement happening. Do you recognize that happening? Do you see it? I
Oh
saw your
yeah.
face.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is like the spoonful of medicine we never thought we would have to swallow, right? Like the feminist movement is awesome because of course we want equal rights and of course we want to be able to do all these things, but like I said, when the people are starving, they overeat. So the pendulum swing went from having no rights to all of a sudden hating all the men and then wanting to be the man, right? And I'm not saying that you have to keep traditional roles in order to preserve masculine feminine energy, but it's this whole different dynamic where it's like not only do I make my own money, but now fuck men, they're useless, I don't need a man. But like, dude, like then you're ending up so unhappy because you're just doing everything by yourself, you're hyper independent, you never ask for help, and then you're experiencing what it's like to be a man, which is they don't talk to anybody, they're alone, you have to financially support yourself and your whole family. Like it's stressful. Like it's not easy. It's not easy to be a stay-at-home mom, and it's not easy to be a full-on provider either. But those roles worked really well for a while because everybody knew what they were doing, right? And now it's getting all confused, and it's just the hatred and the criticism, and it's just too much. So I love that you found a more natural dynamic to fall into and that you guys both really appreciate those roles because it's so much easier to know exactly what you're doing from the start. And I think everybody should know, every woman, every man should know how to support themselves. Like, I don't think that you should be without skills. I don't think that you should be without at least a little stream of income or something just to get you by. Like, don't be fully reliant and codependent on someone. But if they're going to be a provider, like, let them be a provider, you know?
Yeah. And something that really stuck with me with my Mimi, which she is the woman that raised me. And she, for me, is the personification of everything that a woman should be, because she is one of the most kind and compassionate, empathetic people I have ever known. And she is the embodiment of grace and resilience. She was a woman that immigrated from third world country, Jamaica, raised four boys that two of them are doctors. One is a lawyer, and my father was a genius who's a IT consultant for Apple. He made so many innovations in technology. He was amazing. And she always held space for everyone's emotions. And she's amazing. And she would tell me all the time, she's like, if you don't listen to your body is going to get sick to the point where you can't do anything but listen. If you don't listen to your body, you will get cancer, you will get digestive issues, you will gain weight, you will lose weight, you'll get seizures. And she's like, I got breast cancer, and I had to do like a whole look through my entire life of what have I been living for? What have I been doing? And I recognized that I wasn't taking care of myself. All I was doing was taking care of your papa, which our papa was chronically ill all the time because he was a very diseased man. He was just very sick all the time. But she recognized that her sickness was because she wasn't being taken care of, because she was doing all of the caretaking. And once she started to take care of herself, girl, she's in her 80s. She looks like she's 60. She's in her 80s. She is a very healthy mixed woman. She is cancer free. She is working hard. She walks like 10,000 steps a day. She is eating right. She cooks all of her meals and she goes out and she seeks people out. She goes and visits people in nursing homes, at church, all over the place, makes meals for them, but also is taking care of herself. And she would tell me all the time, she's like, there's a dynamic. She's like, if you are so focused on, being hyper independent and doing everything for yourself, you're not allowing yourself to be taken care of by someone else who could be taking so much weight off of you. And it's not even a burden to them. It's not even a hardship for them. It's just a natural thing. And she's like, I was a part of that feminist movement. I appreciated it. But nowadays, she's like, people don't understand how to allow others to take care of them. It doesn't make you any less than if the mom is earning all the money. It doesn't make the man any less than. It doesn't make the woman any less than if the man is earning all the money, but you have to be able to fill in each other's deficits. And she's like, when it becomes unequal, when it's, the woman making all the money and say the man is staying at home, but he isn't taking care of the children, that's a huge deficit. That will cause a lot of stress. But if you're providing for one another and you're filling in those gaps, that is when you can truly succeed in a relationship. She was telling me all of this because, I'm getting married. And she's like, you need to have check-ins with each other in your marriage of any resentment that you feel, because that's natural, that's normal. That's a human emotion to feel any form of resentment. But if you let it fester, that is when it becomes a huge problem. And I think we have a huge problem now because, so many women were like, oh, I can do this all for myself. And then they're doing. And then they're recognizing that, wait, hold up. Nobody's doing anything for me. And then that festers because you wait and you're expectant for something to be done for you, but nothing happens. And it's like, you're recognizing your need, but you're not communicating it and you're not asking for it to be met. And so I think that's a huge problem with women towards men, is like all these expectations that are not voiced. And then I think the men can feel it. I think they can definitely feel these expectations, but they don't know what to do because the dynamics have changed. And everybody is stepping on each other's toes while also not wanting to step on each other's toes. Do you feel that as well?
Yeah. I mean, that's just what happens when you have unspoken needs and you don't even know the needs yourself. And like what I've learned from coaching men over the last 4 years, and I have really wealthy clients, like they don't care what career a woman has. Like this is where I got lost in the sauce, because I grew up thinking, okay, in order to get the top tier spouse, I have to be the top tier woman. Like, what kind of woman do I have to be? So I thought that meant, what career do I have? Like what accolades can I accumulate? How cool can I be? Like what accomplishments do I have? And that's what he'll like. And that's what'll get me the best spouse. But it actually turns out men don't care about that at all. They care about the emotional support that you're giving them and how well. They just don't care. If a dude loves you, he's not going to care. Like your partner, he's just a provider. He's providing for you, right? Like men want to provide for women who take care of them. That's all. But now women, like, sorry to make that long story short, when you are so focused on having all these achievements and stuff, they don't feel like you're a perfect partner. They feel like you're making yourself a competition. So like, I didn't realize, oh, I just looked like I was fucking competing against all these men, not being the best I could for them, because I have a pretty good career, and they'll marry like a waitress instead. Like it just really doesn't matter.
That's interesting. I wonder why it feels like a competition with men if they see.
It's not if they see it, it's the attitude that comes with it. It's
Oh.
not like men aren't intimidated by successful women. I think that's a rumor, that's a myth. Men aren't attracted to women who brag and criticize and amp up their accomplishments to make men feel small. That's what's happening. There's a lot of successful women that all of a sudden and obviously there's like misogynistic men who do say things like that. But for the most part, a lot of men aren't necessarily misogynistic, but they're just getting criticized by women like, oh, see, I could do that too. Or I can do this better than you. And it's like, dude, that's a competition. Now you've placed yourself in competition. You haven't placed yourself as an equal. You've started to belittle, and you've started to trade off. And that's the difference, because you look at George Clooney didn't get married for years and years, and now he's married to Amal, and Amal has like all of these achievements, all of these awards. Like I think she's got a doctorate. I don't know. She does all this crap, right? She's very well accomplished, but he's not worried about all her accomplishments because she's the perfect man. She's not over there belittling him and making him feel small because he's an actor, right? Like she's like a medicine person, like, like she changes lives. So it's not the accomplishments that men don't like, it's the attitude that usually comes with that demeans men.
That makes a lot of sense.
Makes sense.
No, it does.
Now, this is probably gonna bother you, but can I say something?
Yeah.
Whenever I look at the Trauma Dump podcast, the first thing that comes into my mind is Donald Trump. Has anyone ever said that to you before? Like
No.
when I see it, that's the first name. Like that's what I thought. I'm like, oh, does she have Donald? Oh no, it says Trauma Dump. But it like, when words like look similar and you automatically just see something else.
Yeah, dude.
That's what I see when I look at that.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I'm gonna tell Joey when
Donald Trump podcast. There's just a bucket of fire underneath.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna tell Joey as soon as he gets home. Be like, guess what podcast I run today? He'd be like, what? The Donald Trump podcast. He'd be like, oh my God, really?
That's so funny.
Trump is crazy. He's a character. Do you know, like, I'm about to like dox myself. My family didn't like Trump for his policies, but loved the
entertainment
the
factor.
entertainment of all things
He's so
Trump.
funny.
We went to his inauguration. That's how like much my immigrant parents were like, this is the most biggest event ever. They were losing their minds. My youngest brother, like they decked him out in all Trump attire because they thought this was the funniest thing. We didn't care about Trump. My family was just like, this is the funniest shit in the entire world. And we went, and then we went to the Women's March right after. But like they decked us out. I was a minor. I had no ability to say no. And they just put us in all things Trump attire. I had buttons. We had the Make America Great Again hat. We had like the shirt of his face with the smoldering lips. It was just
the
like
smoldering lips. I have Trump socks. It's got hair on it, and it gave a little comb, so you can comb his hair, and his face is just like,
yep, exactly.
In the wind. The hair is on it. I just love them.
It's so crazy. It's so insane. And it's such a joke. I don't know. All of our politicians are such jokes. Like,
yeah, now it's a reality show. It's like the world's greatest known reality show.
It really
Nothing's
is.
real. Nothing's real. Everything's fake. Everything is just made up. No one's trying to actually do good by America anymore. It really sucks, but guess that's just how the cookie crumbles,
Yep. That is legitimately what is happening. And both sides recognize it. They're like, what is going on? Both sides recognize it. It's really interesting because, bring it all back to men and women. We all have Oh, look, I might film him. Look at this. There he is. Do you see
Oh.
him?
There he goes.
He's about to try and unplug something. Loki Wong. Don't you dare. He'll look for whatever he thinks will make me angry the most, and then he'll grab it.
Really?
Oh yeah, he's like that. I
course.
don't understand why. But
How do
bring it
they
back.
know?
I don't know.
Like they always know. They're like, this
He's
looks important. Let's destroy it.
yeah, he's my fiance's cat, and he doesn't like me. He only likes Joey. So I think that's also
Oh,
part of it. He
I don't
doesn't
like
like
cats.
me.
I think men with cats are red flags. If we want to get personal about it.
He
I
really
mean,
likes
you have a
Loki.
dog, he has a black cat, dude. That's some witchcraft right there. That's a red flag to me. That's a red
Well,
flag to me.
technically, he has a puppy and a cat, and then I have Gigi, my service dog, and then I also have a cat. So if you look
Oh,
like
you have
right
a
here,
cat too. Okay.
yes. So that's my Gigi, the white one. That's his Mochi, the black one. His Loki's looking out the window, and then Lucy's in that chair. I don't know if you can see her, but she's
Oh,
in that
okay.
chair.
Is she also black?
She's a Maine Coon. Hold on. I'll pick her up. She's
It's a man.
tweet and very little, but she's very shy. She doesn't do anything wrong. She's literally our most unproblematic animal we have ever had. She's the cheapest animal. She never gets sick. She never does anything wrong. Loki's just evil. I don't know why he is so evil. I told
He's a
Joey,
cat. What do
he
you
is a cat.
mean? Cats are like that.
Yeah.
Only very few are nice cats.
Lucy is very nice. She loves people. But we call her Dog Cat because Gigi raised her. So we got Lucy when she was like that little, and she tried to suckle off of Gigi's teats, and she followed Gigi around. She wags her tail like a dog.
That's so
She knows how
funny.
to sit and stay. So she thinks she's
Aw.
a dog. But yeah, Joey has Mochi and Loki, and I have Gigi and Lucy. And we both have two, but Mochi and Loki are the most problematic pets that we have. And so I tell him all the time, I'm like, they just suck up all of your chaotic energy and just put it out into the world, because he's a very great man, but he can be very chaotic and gremlin mode and just want to annoy the shit out of me and anyone that's around him, which he can't do at work, so I allow it.
I allow it.
I don't know. He's weird, but I do understand the whole cats with men red flag thing. Why let's delve into that. Why do you think men with cats are red flags? Tell
I
me
mean,
about
that's not my professional opinion. That's just my personal preference. I didn't have to put that out as a
it.
no one judge me as my, if you got a cat and you're a client, that's fine. Just my own dating preferences. I don't know. I think there's a personality type that goes with cat lovers. And for me specifically, I'm not that personality type. So for me, it's a no-go. I just feel like, I don't know, dude. I just feel like if you're a dude as a cat, it's just
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
you're probably introverted or you're probably you're like hiding things or you have like a big ego. That's just how I feel.
That's interesting. That's really interesting because cats are very selective in who they like as people. Because I haven't had cats, but I lived on a big property and we had cats on the property. And they were very selective over who was allowed to pet them at certain times and then who got beat the fuck up at certain
Yeah.
times. Like I have a couple really weird, you can't see it on the camera, but I have some really deep scars from like a cat attacking me when I was a kid.
Yeah, I feel like
Because
they attack nice people and I feel like they bond with the evil ones. That's what I'm saying. So I'm freaking saying, dude. I think cats have been proven to like not actually like humans. They just live with them because it's convenient for food. You know, and people like to pretend. Sorry, I'm like really diving into this with you. Like people like to pretend that their cats like them, and it's just I've heard it's not true. I've
No,
heard it's
cats
not
don't
true.
like people. I know that they don't. I know that Loki's just taking advantage of us for food because he's a little rat bastard. I'm watching him right now. He's
Dang, you better get all this resentment out before the wedding.
I know. Well, here's the funniest part. We got
Cats
Loki
come
when
with
we first started
trauma.
dating. We got Loki when we first started dating. So technically
Oh.
he's both of ours, but he's not mine because that was Joey's.
No.
He's Joey's. He only likes Joey. He only lets Joey pick him up. Whenever I try to like hold him for more than 10 seconds, he bites me and wiggles. But Joey can just hold him forever and be like, "Oh, you are my little man. You are my whole world." And I'm just watching it like, uh-huh. But we got him when he was really tiny, and his mom tried to eat him. So, like the cat's mom tried to eat
He
him.
just doesn't like feminine energy then.
Maybe. I don't know. It's just he's an interesting man with his little bow tie. But yeah, I've had lots of cats. I did have an ESA cat when I was in college. His name is Clark Kent. And he was a good cat, but he was also raised with Gigi. So again, he was a dog cat. And he never once bit me, clawed me, never once bit or clawed any single person ever. I don't think he really knew how to claw things because we never got him like cat trees or anything like that. He just lived with Gigi. And I brought him with me to college, and he was such a good boy and genuinely very therapeutic. And like a couple months before my dad died, he died suddenly, and then my dad died. And it was just very, very sad. But he was a good dude. It's Clark Kent, little Superman. And I could dress him up. I have like pictures of him in costume. He's just a good guy. But yeah, cats will take advantage of people. And I don't know. Cats will be really mean sometimes. It's not always great, but it is interesting that you have like that, bias, that opinion that some men with cats, you don't want to be around them because of how you've, interacted
I don't want
with
to
them.
listen. It's not that I don't want to be around them. I just don't want to date them as my own personal preference. That's different. Listen, I'm not saying men with cats are bad people. That's just a personal preference of like, but I'm
You
also
don't want a cat.
I do not want a cat. No. I want to be maybe it's because I am the cat. I want to be the main attention. Someone's got a pet. You're going to give the pet more attention than me. I don't want that. We can get you a fish. How about that?
I get that. I get
What
that.
I mean?
I comprehend that. I mean, I've had pets my entire life. The most animals that I had at one time was 6 dogs, 12 chickens, and 2 horses. And having pets as a kid really taught me a lot of responsibility. And that was a way for my dad to teach me and my brothers how to provide for something that couldn't provide for itself because we domesticated it. But yeah, I love having animals, and I think that animals should really serve a purpose. I don't like the idea of pets, but I do like the idea of animals that serve a purpose. Like my service dog is a seizure alert service dog, so she has a very big purpose. And then, for me, I'm at home by myself most of the time. So it's enjoyable for me to have at least some company with my animals. And I take both of the dogs to the dog park for 2 hours a day. And then that's a way for me to go and talk to people and try to interact. I've made so many friends at the dog park. It is one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
It's so fun. It's so fun to go and talk to people. And I think really that we have a loneliness problem now more than ever because everybody is so chronically online and they're so addicted to, that dopamine of, the internet releases a lot of dopamine for a lot of different people. And we don't get that instant gratification from hanging out with people as we would say being online. And then we're lonely all the time. And I have noticed a lot of men are just really, really lonely. And I think part of that is probably, internet, but also I feel like a lot of men feel in society that they're a bit displaced. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, like we've been kind of going on about the feminist movement, I think it's made them feel even worse about like they don't know how to show up. And when they don't know how to show up around women, they kind of don't really know how to show up around each other. Like they're just isolating a lot.
Mm.
Um, but I think it also at the end of the day does make their brotherhood stronger when they do find men to connect with. So I think it's so important for men to connect with each other and to appreciate each other and to hype each other up instead of like what women do, just bonding over criticism and bonding over negative things.
Yeah. And I think a lot of women need to start hyping each other up too, because there's like that, like I've been seeing so often, they're like, oh, you're such a pick me girl, or oh no, I'm a girl's girl. And I'm like, can't we just exist? Why? Because whenever we're bringing in, definitions like that, we're really separating ourselves and isolating other people, because seeking validation is not a inherent negative thing. It's quite the opposite. We all need validation, but the source that we are seeking the validation from is what can be detrimental to our health, right? And I think, especially with men, I really want to encourage any guy listening, if it's not bad, it's not wrong to need validation. We are social creatures. Humans are all social. We need validation. We need interaction with one another. And we need to feel like we belong. And I want to challenge the guys listening to try and find your tribe. Try and find the people that speak life into your life, and try to be that person that speaks life into other people's lives. Because again, what you were saying before, Elise, like, you will attract what you put out into the world. And I think it's really encouraging to see, your platform growing, because you are really attracting people who need help. And I really appreciate it, because that's how I found you. I was just looking up men's mental health life coaches because I wanted to talk to people about this types of stuff. I kept seeing your name pop up. It's like, okay, bet. All right, this is who I'm gonna try and reach out to. And I'm very thankful for your team to accept my request. Thank you to the team. I appreciate you guys. The
Well,
gatekeepers.
yeah, I appreciate you reaching out, and yeah, shout out to Michelle. She's my right hand girl. Yeah, no, I love that people are diving more into this topic, because we do need to think about men and where they're at, and just because we talk about it once doesn't mean it's actually enough to make a change.
That's very, very, very true. And speaking on how men's mental health affects women, how has the men in your life affected your own mental health?
Well, that's like a chicken and egg type of question, right? Everybody's foundations for how they operate start in childhood. So you can pretty much guarantee that your caregivers, if you had a mom and dad or whatever influences you had, masculine, feminine, that's going to be your imprint for who you kind of are attracted to, the type of behaviors you accept, the type of love that you seek. My dad was not a healthy man. But I thought he was, because he was more present than my mom. So I saw him as my idol, as like my best friend. As I grew older, that got me in a lot of trouble because he was not healthy, and took me a long time to realize that even though I love my dad, I don't respect my dad as a man, and realize a lot of the behaviors that he had were unhealthy. So you have to really kind of like analyze. I mean, that was my first impression. So then at that point, I'm attracted to men who are probably not so good for me, right? But I've had good and bad experiences with men. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of cool male mentors that just entered my life. I think God given. But I've also had people who were, abusive or sexually assaulting. I don't know if we need a trigger warning for that, right? But I'm always a person that you have to take accountability for the paths that you're leading. And yeah, but I think the foundations are I didn't have a good male mentor to begin with. And so it led me down the path of not understanding my own needs and boundaries. And so I would bypass red flags because I was gaslit to do that. So yeah, I mean, chicken and egg, right?
Mm.
Now I have an affirmation that I'm only surrounded by men who take care of their women and take care of me. And I stand very firm on that boundary. Like I don't surround myself by men who give me bad energy, who disrespect themselves, disrespect women. Like I'm so adamant about being around kind, considerate, caring men. And I feel like once you affirm certain things to yourself, it just starts happening for you. So yeah, I love men. I love the men in my life now.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. How did you initially, once you recognize that my dad may not be a person that I want to emulate or a person that I would like to, attract as a life partner in my life? How did that first, you know, change for you? When did you make that concerted effort of, I need to start attracting people that I respect? How did you start make that change?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was only just recently that I really admitted out loud I don't respect my father. Because you never want to say that like about your parents. You feel like such a shame as a child to say like either I don't like them or I don't like their behavior. Like you never want to speak badly about them. There's just some inherent child thing that feels like betrayal. But you have to be honest with yourself. So there were so many instances, I mean, where I knew that it was wrong, the behavior, but it wasn't until recently that I came into consciousness of like I need to be very aware of the type of man that my father is. But some examples of like behavior that I knew was not right that I knew started to show up in me, like in high school. uh my dad was getting arrested a lot, and one time the cop showed up at our house and my dad was there and he told me I needed to lie to the cop, and the cop was a male. And so the cop comes to the door and I'm like battling between, do I lie to the law or do I lie for my father, because he is the one, I'm dedicated to, right? Where does your loyalty lie, right? So I'm lying to the officer, but he can tell that I'm lying because I'm in high school. And he's like, "Are you lying to me?" He's like, "Is your dad here? Are you lying to me? Are you lying to me?" And I was like, "Yes." You're pressured. I'm like, I'm not gonna get her. Like you don't know what's gonna happen. You feel unsafe in both. And so he found my dad, and my dad just looked so disappointed. But later on that year, I was student council president and we went under these bomb shelters in the high school. You're not supposed to go in them. We were kids. We were like, I don't do it anyway. The next day, someone confronts me about it, like, hey, Elise, some kids like went down in the bomb shelter last night. Do you know anything about that? And I was like, no, I don't know anything about it. So I lied, right? So stupid. They had the video cameras. And my friend Katie, she was with me, and she said she told her mom, and her mom told her, whatever they ask you, just tell them the truth. Like, just bear like whatever punishment happens. So when I heard that, I was like, damn, dude, maybe I should have told the truth. And so I went back to the teacher and I just said, hey, look, it was actually us. Like, I lied. And in that moment, I realized like my dad was teaching me how to be a coward.
Mm.
And I didn't want to follow in those footsteps. Sorry, Dad, if you ever listen to this one day in your life. Um, it's really sad to like admit that, like, but from that moment forward, I was like, dude, like, I don't want to be a liar. I don't want to like run away from the things that I should bear consequences for. Because if you're just doing that your whole life, you make everybody else pay the consequences. I had to pay the consequence of the trauma of having to lie to a police officer at 17. Like, that's crazy. You should never put your child in that position. And then to make me become a coward that I will have to pay the consequence for the rest of my life. So I realized in that moment, like I wasn't going to do that, you know? Sorry if that was too traumatic of a story to tell.
No, that's perfect because we are the Trauma Dump podcast. That's perfect. I mean, and it's really amazing because, you know, there's going to be a lot of people listening to this and resonating with what you're saying, and they wouldn't have been able to comprehend some part of their own trauma unless they hear it from someone else, or comprehend that something that they were taught was wrong unless you hear something else. You know, I disapprove of my mother completely. I will say it to the end of my day. She is a horrible, horrible woman, and she is going to get what is coming to her. And part of my own trauma is that part of me is linked to her. You know, part of my personality comes from her. Part of my looks comes from her. And it's hard to differentiate yourself from your parents and be like, no, this is not who I want to be. This is not the cycle that I want to continue. And it is really empowering eventually once you start to recognize that, oh, yeah, I am different in positive ways from my parents, from the people that raised me, from the people who had the utmost influence in my life. And, you know, from my own perspective, my mom was the example of everything a woman should not be. Like, she did not care for us as kids. She only wanted kids for the social, you know, expectation of, oh, I'm a mom. Like, she loved to post us on Facebook for that gratification from other people, that she's such a great mom, when she starved us constantly. Like, she wouldn't put food in the house, but she would put food in her bedroom, and she had multiple locks on her bedroom so her kids couldn't get in and get food. That's a real thing that happened to us. She did not nurture us. She moved me schools 14 different times. I never had a concrete foundation or a group of friends that I could rely on because of her. And when we think about these feminine traits of, you know, someone who is loving and listens and allows space for, you know, your child's emotions, she never ever allowed space for me to have any emotions ever, especially not when our dad was in the hospital. She wouldn't let us go see him because she said, no, I'm the most important person in his life. I'm going to be there, not you guys. Like, I had to fight her tooth and nail to even go see my dad in the hospital. It was insane. And when he was dying in hospice, she prevented his family from going to see him until the day before he died. And that's horrible, because she thought she's the most important. And she refused to go to his funeral because it wasn't what she wanted for his funeral. And then when she had his, quote, her own funeral for him, she didn't have his kids there. She spread his ashes in Jamaica, his home country, without his kids. She spread his ashes in the Grand Canyon without his kids. She spread his ashes in Las Vegas without his kids, and had a private funeral for just her and her friends. She is everything that I refuse to be. And she never cared for the house. She was a hoarder. Like, from the moment that I could comprehend what it was to clean up after yourselves, which I got from my grandparents, my Mimi and Papa, I recognized that she never did. Like, my little brothers would sit in dirty diapers all the time. And as a 5-year-old, I knew that I had to change them or else they'd get a rash. I learned very quickly on how to take care of myself and take care of my brothers. And something that will ring in my head for the rest of my life was when I was 6 years old and I was banging on her door asking her for food. She said, "Feed yourself." That will ring in my head for the rest of my life. And that is trauma. And it's real. And my dad was a great dad for all his parts. He was very compassionate, but he had to take on that role of both mother and father, and that was unfair for him. And he didn't do that role perfectly at all. He was a great dude, but that's a lot of stress, a lot of responsibility to do both for us kids, and my parents were married. So I didn't have a good example of what marriage was. I didn't understand that marriage is an equal partnership until I started dating and getting into relationships of I'm doing everything for this other person because I'm emulating my dad, but I'm never allowing anyone to do things for me. And that's something I had to recognize within myself, especially once I started 3 years ago dating my now fiance, of allowing him to do things for me and allowing input, because I would burn myself out all the time. And then I recognized that I would act like my mother and lash out because my mom was always lashing out. My dad never did. Pacifist, never lashed out. My mother constantly lashing out, angry. And I recognized it within myself, like, I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be upset, especially if I'm causing the problem. I don't want to be angry. So I had to go to intensive therapy and processing what I was going through, of recognizing this is what I want to change. Here are the steps I need to put in for it to change. And one of the biggest steps was to allow Joey to hold space in my life and start to take care of me because I needed it. I needed to be taken care of. I'd been doing all of the taking care of for everyone, my family, including a family of 4 boys. I was a nanny to 4 boys for 7 years. I was not taken care of at all. And so it was such a bizarre shift to have someone who wanted me to thrive and wanted me to feel loved, to the point where, like, every week he gets me bouquets of flowers because I deserve it, because he's like, you're beautiful and I love you and I want you to feel loved. I never have to ask for these things. He just wants to do it to show me love and show me that he appreciates me. And every so often he'll get me random bags of candy because he'll notice, he's like, okay, she's out of candy. I'm gonna go get her another bag. Like 2 days ago, I was throwing up and I told him, I was like, I can't cook dinner. I can't get out of bed. I feel really, really sick. He's like, okay. And so he comes home from work, which is like 12, 13-hour shift, working on his own truck. He comes home and he brings me some snacks and he's like, okay, I made sure, because I'm allergic to a lot of stuff. He's like, this doesn't have any corn syrup. There's no cornstarch. I made sure. And then he's like, I'm gonna cook dinner. I was like, what the heck? What, where did you come from? Who are you? Because even we've been together 3 years, it's still weird in my brain. It's not a weird thing, but it's still weird in my brain to be like, oh, someone actually wants to, fill in where I am struggling and pick up the slack for me. So I do it all the time for him, but that's what I'd been doing my whole life for everyone else. So it wasn't like that big of a deal, but for him, it was a huge deal because he grew up in a single mother household where his mother was so focused on being a boss ass bitch and getting her law degree and becoming the best lawyer ever, that he wasn't really taken care of as a kid. He was left to the wayside. So me, I filled in a lot of trauma and like helped him figure out a lot of stuff just by me being me. I'm being in his life and actively taking care of him. I pack his lunch for him every single morning. I make his breakfast every single morning. 6 a.m. I'm up with him, making sure that he has everything ready for the work day. And he never had that from his own mother. So it's not like I'm not his mommy. I'm not mommying him. I'm just filling in that gap of, here, let me take care of you, because he could do it for himself. He's been doing it for himself. And I think it's super beneficial that we need to recognize how we impact one another's lives, whether for negative or for positive. It's so important. And I like what you said earlier, of like, I want to date someone that I respect, you know, because that's so true. If you are dating someone and you don't respect them, are you really dating them? Is it really a mutual relationship? Or is it just you trying to fix them? And I recognize a lot of the people that I've dated in the past, I was trying to fix them. Ah, it's
Yeah,
so
we
hard.
realize that it's crazy. Like, yeah, you need to be able to respect the person, and that's why, dating can be a little bit harder for women who are doing a lot in business and stuff, because I feel like a lot of men, they don't have good male mentors, just like women don't have good male mentors. And so they're not pushing themselves as hard as they could to be the best. And then women are kind of passing them up. And then so a lot of women are criticizing them and demeaning them. And a woman needs a man she can look up to. A woman cannot be with a man she looks down to. She needs to be able to respect him so that she can submit and get behind him. And even like me, like I have a pretty successful, lucrative business, and I'm in the public eye, and I'm never going to stop doing that. But I want to find a man who is above me, who I can get behind. Like, not to put myself beneath him, but I want to support him with my skill set. I don't want to do this forever. Like, of course, I'll always support men forever, but I don't want to be a boss babe. Like, that's so weird. Like, I've never used that term to describe myself ever. I think it's just so weird. It's like reaching, it's like, I think that is like what do they call the pick me girls. Like, honestly, I think those things do come into play sometimes. But yeah, like, but it's a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder when you do more. Obviously, you lower the pool, because just like anybody, the more you do, the less there is of people doing those things, right? That's okay, because everybody only needs just one person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think you are a boss babe. I'm gonna reinforce that. You definitely are a boss babe, and that's okay. And I also want to reinforce for people that don't understand what like submitting is, it doesn't mean that you're less than that person. It means that you respect that person so much that their influence matters, their opinion matters, their perspective matters.
It
And
means
it's
they're the leader in the relationship. Like, there can only be
Mhm.
one leader. Like, just
Mhm.
let them lead. And a lot of women do not respect their men enough to lead. They're leading. They're like, you're dumb. I got this, like, it's bad. And then
Mhm.
it's just like a lot of men are emasculated in their own marriages.
Yeah. And you know, on average, there as much as, a relationship is very much a team effort, a team doesn't succeed because you're doing the same thing equally. A team
Right.
succeeds because you're one person is filling this role and another person is filling the other role. Like it's it doesn't succeed because you're doing the same thing. I personally, I've told my fiance this, like when we first started dating, I was like, I cannot provide for myself financially. I need you to know that. And he was like, well, what do you mean? Because we had first started dating. I was like, I cannot provide for myself financially. Number one, I am a disabled individual. It is very hard for me to keep a job. Like right now, I'm working as a nanny, but I have been doing this for 7 years and I'm extremely burnt out. Number two, like that's not my skill set. My skill set is in the arts, and the arts are very lucrative. And so I know even if I do make some money, it's not going to be enough that is sustainable so that I can say have a house or a car or a phone. Like there's lots of different expenses. And I was like, I know this because I worked for my dad for a very long time. And I know, even though I worked for my dad, even though I did my job really, really well, I know he was giving me more money than I was worth. I know he was. I really do. And it was always very frustrating. It's like I know that I'm a disabled individual and I'm trying to get on disability and I need someone to provide for me financially. That's just what I know. And I was like, but I know that I can provide in all the other ways. I'm very good at making sure a schedule is kept. I'm always on time for every event. I'm very good at managing a household. I'm very good at finding wherever someone needs, like, I'm good at fulfilling a need. I have very great social skills, but like in this economic structure, unfortunately, I'm not in a place mentally or physically where I can provide for myself. And he was like, okay, heard. And from that day, we had started dating for a month. From that day, I didn't ever pay for anything ever. Ever. Like, it was a very rare occurrence,
Yeah.
even for me to pay for stuff, but he would give me money, so it wasn't really me
I love
paying
that.
for it. It was him paying for it, and I wanna reinforce to people that that is not me leeching off of him.
Yeah, of course not. I mean, dude,
It's
you
not.
literally said, the trade-off, like, people have the trade, and men love to provide. They love to do it. Any man, even if he's like, oh, we should be 50-50. No, there is a woman out there that he would never make pay a dollar for anything. Think about that. Any man listening to this, he's like, damn, she's right. Because when you hit the certain heartstrings, when you fulfill the certain needs, money doesn't matter. I mean, like, any of us can make money. Like you said, it's really hard for you to make money. Like, that's a legitimate thing. And a man is happy to take care of you. Like, men love taking care of women who are gentle with them, who take care of them. Of course, a man is going to make an independent boss babe woman who doesn't need him pay 50-50. Why would he ever take care of her if she's just going to demean him and emasculate him? That's never going to happen. It would never happen. And I used to be a 50-50 girl because I thought that was what was honoring a man, but it actually emasculates him. And then I went into the field of, no, I want to be taken care of and I want to be provided for. And I am not going to move from that because
Yeah.
I know that men appreciate that. But actually, I'm so sorry because I have to go
Of course,
to
of
go to my next
course.
meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Any final thoughts for those of us listening?
No, I just think take care of yourself, try to understand your own needs, and always, always, always reach out because there's always someone willing to hold space, even if the immediate people around you aren't.
If you're watching us over on YouTube, here are our memes of the week, carefully curated by the amazing people over on our Discord server. Now, let's get into those memes. At the end of every episode, we spin our wheel of emotions to learn a new feeling and how it correlates to trauma. So let's spin this wheel. Ooh. So that's pretty crazy. It landed right in between disapproval and critical. So we're gonna use judgmental and sarcastic. So I think judgmental, sarcastic, disapproval, critical, judgmental, sarcastic. That is like really interesting because we don't really ever land in between two emotions that often. And so disapproval, judgmental. We can be super judgmental of other people's mental health, especially when we try to, differentiate ourselves so much. Like, I'm a woman and you're a man and you have no idea what it's like to be a woman in my society, rather than saying, hey, I'm a woman, you're a man, I would like to tell you how my life is a bit different than yours, and I would like to hear how your life is different from mine. And more often than not, you will find those pieces of, oh my gosh, our lives aren't really that different from one another. You suffer from depression too? Wow, I never knew. Please tell me more about that. Yeah, I said too. Yeah, I also suffer from depression. This is how my depression affects me. If we live our lives so surrounded, ingrained with just judgment, instant snap decision that, oh, this is a person that's different from me, they can never understand what my life is like, therefore I'm going to make that snap judgment and be like, I don't want to have anything to do with that person. That happens all the time. And it happens all the time without us even recognizing it, without us even realizing how we perceive the world and how those snap judgments can be so isolating. Not just isolating from us towards that person, but isolating in our everyday to-day life. And I've noticed it within myself that if I'm constantly trying to, put myself and label myself as different, and find identity in those differences, I'm also, pushing away people that may have more similarities with me because I'm just focusing on my differences. I really want to challenge you guys today to try to find commonality with just one person. Try to find that commonality and do your best to see another person. Now, not just like visually see them, but see their struggles, see their triumphs, see what they're going through, and do your best to try and be there for them, be present in the moment, and listen. And once we start to allow ourselves to be influenced by other people in a not negative way, in a positive way, we can then create a place where we can have more positive influence on those around us. But it all starts with listening. My Mimi would always tell me, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. The 2 ears are so that you can listen more than you speak. And, sometimes that hits me really hard because I'm a talker. I have a podcast. I'm a talker. I am a talker. And sometimes I really have to take that back seat, especially with this podcast. It's teaching me so much, but it's also teaching me to listen, to allow myself to be influenced by other people and influenced in a way that is productive and influenced in a way that is understanding and compassionate. And that's what I want to challenge you guys today to do, is listen. Listen to someone else. And listen to understand. Don't listen to react or respond. Just listen to understand. Special thanks goes out to all of our amazing members on our Discord server. If you want to join our Discord server, it's anonymous. It's free. You can come join us, share with others, get podcast updates, make some friends. Completely anonymous. It's super, super fun. We have a meme channel. You can submit your memes for the Meme of the Week segment on the podcast. It's a vibe. So please don't hesitate to join our Discord to share with others. If you'd like to support our podcast, we have a Patreon. Different tiers can get you a bracelet like this one, which are handmade bracelets made by me, Grace. And I'll just show you real quick. I'm really into this. These are bracelets. I made each and every single one of these by hand. Hell yeah. So if you want to support our podcast, you can get a bracelet like those, or you can get a sticker like the one on the back of my computer. We also have a bonfire where you can get custom apparel designed by yours truly. Those links are in the description. Any support helps us out a lot, so if you feel compelled to, please like, subscribe, and share the show with your friends. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you so much. Any support helps us out a lot, so please share the show with your friends. And remember, you are capable of a fulfilling life in spite of your circumstances and your trauma. May you rise again from the ashes and be filled with peace, hope, love, joy, and understanding. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Mwah! Goodbye!